Hello again, YouTube family. Thanks for joining me on another video. This video is going over the affordable housing crisis currently in the United States, and depending on where you live, it could be a potentially horrendous situation like California. Some other areas could be not so bad. We have a national low-income housing coalition study saying that a person working 40 hours per week at minimum wage can afford a standard two-bedroom apartment in exactly 0 counties across the United States. No one working for minimum wage in the United States can afford to live. That is, housing, food, utilities, transportation, the necessities. Cannot do it. A 2016 Harvard study showed half of U.S. renters are cost burdened, that is, paying 30% or more of their income on rent. Housing prices are rising at twice the level of wage growth. And there is a chart to display this. And the bottom green line is wage growth. The upper red line is the cost in housing, the average cost in housing in America. And when housing is increasing in cost at a much greater pace than wages are, you have certainly got a problem in your country. And that is where we are at right now in the United States. And there aren't enough people trying to work on the problem. There are many factors. As with any large, complex problem in a large country, there are many factors affecting the current crisis in affordable housing, such as market forces, government policies, and demographic changes. In 1965, President Johnson, Lyndon L.B. Johnson, created the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is HUD, which you've probably heard of before. It's been in the vernacular since the mid-60s when it was created. This was to create housing and rent subsidies to help curb the impacts of generational poverty and the impacts of long-term racial injustice. As many in the black community can attest, for a long time we were basically holding black families out of being able to get their own houses, buy their own houses. There were areas they weren't allowed in, the redlining and all that. The following presidents succeeding Johnson tore down, not expanded on Johnson's vision. Nixon put a moratorium on construction of public housing. Reagan and Clinton followed policies of building public housing only to replace existing housing, but no new public housing, no new subsidies, just maintenance of what was there, or replacement of what was there. Reagan had cut HUD's rental assistance programs. This all led to homelessness being a permanent fixture in America. Some small towns, you may not have such a high degree of homelessness. If you live in one of the larger metropolitan areas, you certainly know there is an epidemic of homelessness in America. I mean, honestly, you've got people who work full-time jobs and make what some in the country would think would be rather decent wages, $60,000 to $90,000 per year, and sleep in tents in California because they can't find a home they can afford. The rents are too high, the homes are too high, they don't have enough take-home pay to afford it. The mortgage interest deduction, MID, costs the government more in revenue than the total spent annually on government housing and rental assistance. And so you have the mortgage interest deduction, which is where if you're a homeowner and you're paying a mortgage, you can deduct that mortgage interest from your taxes. That mostly benefits the middle class, upper middle class, and certainly the wealthy have benefited through those programs. And the people who are left out are the ones who are poor, the ones who are always left out. And the lost revenue the government has each year from the mortgage interest deduction is more than they pay in total on government housing and rental assistance. And like I said, it's a subsidy for middle and upper income earners who are able to own a home. There are policies affecting where housing can be constructed and limiting height of buildings, height of structures. That all factors into the housing issues. There may be some folks who agree there should be affordable housing, but they don't want it built next door to them. The not in my backyard. It's the people refer to it as NIMBY. Not in my backyard. Yeah. By all means, help people get affordable housing, but don't put them next door to me. They can't build in our neighborhood. They can't build on this side of town. That kind of thing has been one of the factors affecting it, and you have people that consider themselves left-leaning people that are still middle class, upper middle class, or just straight out wealthy, who, when it comes to vocalizing support for initiatives for people, they are more than happy to do it. But when it comes to actually doing something like, well, don't do it here, this is where I live. California has implemented laws that make building affordable housing limited, which has led to their problem, where they have people with decent incomes and full-time jobs who can't afford to live in the damn state. It has led to California's housing crisis. As I said, you have people working full-time jobs, sleeping in tents. I'd watched one reporter who was going around talking to these folks that are living in tents. And I mean, you've got couples living in tents on the sidewalk in California. They have jobs, and California has been going through and clearing out the tents. So if you leave your tent during the day to go to work, there's street crews that'll come through and clean the tents. So these people, because they're not dumb, they're not uneducated, many of them have college degrees and professional jobs, they have paid attention to the streets that get cleaned out. And so once a street has the people go through and sweep that street, they'll move their tent to that street and know they've got so many days before they have to move their tent again. So they can leave their tent up and then go to work, and then when they get off work, come back and their tent's there, and they don't have to buy a new tent, they don't have to buy new things, whatever they have in their tent, clothing, bedding, whatever. And I mean, it's asinine. We have people working full-time jobs sleeping in tents because they can't afford to live. They can't afford the rents. They can't afford the mortgages. You've got builders in California that are building mostly custom homes that are super expensive because the profit is so much more on those homes. As I mentioned before, NIMBY mindset, not in my backyard mindset, has helped increase their own home values. That's for people who have homes, particularly who have homes in suburbs, but hurt the broader economy. The broader economy is hurting because of this mindset. And there's a statement from the Obama administration dealing with this, which is too many of the communities with the most dynamic growth have pulled up those ladders behind them, often unintentionally, by creating conditions that make it impossible for families to find affordable housing in the same communities where they find jobs. which is insane. But that is very widespread. People getting jobs in areas where they can't afford to live. And it's asinine. I mean, my job, I'm an air traffic controller. There are airports in areas where air traffic control wages, which are pretty good wages, you can't afford to live. So you've got to commute. And in some cases, I mean, you have people that'll work in someplace like Wyoming and will commute from Idaho because that's where they can afford to live at. And you have the situation of urban sprawl, where the city starts to spread out. You have suburbs, you have small cities growing on the outskirts of large cities. And where affordable housing ends up being further from your job, increasing transit time and expense. In Phoenix, Arizona, residents spend nearly 50% of their income on housing and transportation costs. Apparently, Phoenix doesn't have a particularly good city transit, public transit system, and there are a ton of places that don't. I mean, there are more towns and cities in this country that do not have public transportation at all than the ones that have it, let alone have good public transportation. But in Phoenix, Arizona, residents spend nearly 50% of their entire annual income just on where they live and transportation to and from work, to and from buying groceries, wherever. I mean, it's insane. A Harvard study by their Joint Center on Housing Studies showed as housing costs decreased, the amount spent on transportation increased up to 5 times. And that's having to do with the urban sprawl. You know, for people work, say, in Dallas-Fort Worth, but to find a house they can afford, they've got to live, 20 miles, 30 miles, 40 miles outside of town. It's insane. The U.S. is currently short 7 to 12 million affordable housing units, which is causing the problems of people paying too much of their income in rent or mortgages, too many people being homeless. Rent-burdened people are paying 30% or more of their income on rent. Severely rent-burdened people are those who are spending 50% or more on rent. So you have the rent-burdened. If you're spending over 30% of your income on rent, you're rent-burdened. That is, the cost of where you live is taking too much of your income. You're severely rent-burdened if you're spending half or more of your income on rent, which, I mean, it is insane, the idea of spending half of what you make on rent or mortgage, which is where a lot of people are at. A Pew study found 2 out of every 5 people in the United States are rent-burdened. 2 out of every 5. 1 out of every 5 are severely rent-burdened, and these numbers are growing. The rent-burdened people are growing. The severely rent-burdened are growing. According to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, 40% of low-income Americans are either homeless or severely rent-burdened. That's one of the issues with the poor, is 40% of low-income Americans. These are people who work jobs, they're just underpaid or underemployed, and 40% of them are either homeless or severely rent-burdened. That is, like I was explaining in California, people that have jobs, and those people aren't low-income. They make what would normally be a decent income, just not for California. And they're homeless, sleeping in tents on the street because they can't afford to live, but that's where their job is at. And you have some people that might argue, well, they just need to go and get a job somewhere else. Yeah, there's other places, there's places in this country, there's small towns in Alabama, Georgia, where they could probably find an affordable house. Can they find a job? there that would allow them to afford the house. That's the issue. And people make it out like, oh, people can just move. No, you can't just necessarily move and have a job that will afford you to be able to live where you're going. The average home price in the U.S. right now is $310,800. It's an increase of 14.6% since last year. The average home price in this country has gone up almost 15% since last year. The higher house prices mean buyers are paying a higher percentage of their income on where they live. Over the past year, homes sold under $100,000 were down 22%, while home sales between $750,000 and $1 million jumped 85%. That is over the past year, just in the last year. Homes valued that are priced at $100,000 or less were down 22%. While home sales between $750,000 and $1 million jumped 85%. You've got to have one hell of a nice income to buy a $750,000 to a $1 million house. Homes priced over $1 million increased in sales 88% over the last year. According to rentcafe.com, people earning $150,000 per year or more is the fastest growing rent segment. You have people renting even with higher incomes. I mean, $150,000 per year puts you in a high income bracket. You're not in the top 2%, but you're certainly in the top 5%, maybe the top 4%. In some markets, private equity groups purchased as much as 90% of available homes during the Great Recession, and this is the heart of the issue. Every time we have financial downturns, and this is a sign of where we're at right now in America. We are in the late stage capitalism point in America. We've been around for long enough, practicing our capitalistic system long enough to where we've created a system where you have a small number of extremely wealthy people at the top, and then everybody else spread out over a very broad gambit of incomes, all the way to the absolute poverty-stricken. And now you have a situation, and it's been going on for quite a while. I mean, there was a large jump during the Great Recession, but this current situation where we have a recession coupled with this pandemic has caused even more wealthy individuals along with private equity groups to jump into the buying homes for a profit situation. And they've been buying a large percentage of the affordable houses on the market. With so much housing now rented by large equity firms, tenants are stuck with high rent fees and an unwillingness on the part of the owner to make repairs. You have large investment firms that have formed home rental companies. Blackstone, a large equity firm, established Invitation Homes. Colony Capital established Colony American Homes, and so forth. By 2017, there had been so much consolidation that two companies, Invitation Homes and American Homes for Rent, controlled 60% of the rental market. 60% of the home rental market are owned by two different private equity companies. Cost-cutting measures were installed by these companies since they own such a large percentage of the market. such as making renters do their own home repairs, which is crazy. But these companies have started training that you can log in online and watch to show how to fix this, how to fix that, how to fix other things. And that is to decrease the cost to these private equity companies, because they don't care about you providing you with a place to live, or necessarily even a good place to live. They're just wanting money because they're parking capital in homes. If they get to a point where they find a good investment for the capital, they'll sell the home, pull the capital out, put it in that good investment they want to put it in. Until then, they're getting capital inflow from rent. And these places look at it as a win-win scenario. We've got a lot of capital, know where we want to invest it at right now, so we're going to park it in homes. And we're going to buy enough homes that we control the market, we control the price, and so everybody else has to deal with our price. D.R. Horton, which is the largest home builder in the United States, built 124 homes in Conroe, Texas, and sold every single one of them to an investment firm. Horton Inc. made 2 times what it would have selling to individual families, selling to this one individual investment company. The buyer was Fundrise LLC, an online property investing platform which handles more than $1 billion in equity on behalf of around 150,000 individuals, according to the Wall Street Journal. And that's really the thing that's exacerbating the problem. You have not enough inventory of affordable housing, and like in the situation in Texas, Conroe, Texas, D.R. Horton built 2 neighborhoods. The 2 neighborhoods combined was 124 individual single-family homes. Every one of the 124 single-family homes were bought by an investment firm, not by individuals. And those investment firms are determining the price. And that's the way they play on Wall Street, so that's the way they're going to play in the housing market when they do that. It's all to make themselves richer, even if it hurts the country and hurts the citizens of the country. They don't care, because this is late-stage capitalism. They have the capital to plunk down cash for the 124 homes. So D.R. Horton is making a lot more money by selling to the people that have the cash on hand, as opposed to selling it to individual families over time. Selling it in one fell swoop is what helps D.R. Horton. This is a graph that's showing over time rental vacancy levels. And as you can see, we're in a point right now where rentals are going up, home ownership is going down, and the losers in this scenario are the average working Americans. So you have situations where people either have to rent, and the apartments also, whether you rent an apartment, a condo, whatever, there's a good chance that the same people who are buying these neighborhoods of houses own the apartment you live in or the condo you live in. No matter where you live, most likely you're paying your rent to the same people, because you have the private equity firms that are also buying the rentals around the country. And so you have a situation now where instead of a mom and pop run thing where a family owns apartment complex or multiple apartment complexes, you have private equity companies will go in and buy up apartment complexes throughout a town or a city so that they control the prices. They increase the cost of rent, whether you're renting a apartment, a condo, a house. And you have people who are coming into job market, the rental market, homeowner market now, the millennials, Generation Z is just starting to get out of college and start looking through this stuff. And I mean, you have home ownership going down because millennials, so many of them are stuck. They don't make enough money. I mean, if the average, I mean, I live in Las Vegas. The average cost of rent here is probably somewhere around, I would guess, I've not looked at it lately, around $1,200 to $1,300 per month to rent. And that's because most of the rentals available, apartments, condos, whatever houses, are owned by private equity companies or individual wealthy investors who are parking capital in homes, parking capital in apartments, that kind of thing. And for them, they found that it is a healthy place to park capital because the wealthy people, in case you missed it last year, the top, I believe, the top, actually the billionaires, all the billionaires in America combined last year, their income, their wealth increased by like $1.3 trillion last year. Meanwhile, the bottom 90% of income earners in this country, their wealth decreased by, you guessed it, $1.3 trillion last year. So much of the new money that's made every year goes to the very top, the very, very top earners, whereas everybody else is stuck with what's left. And you're getting a situation where millennials are unable to afford homes. Generation Z, who are just now going to be coming out of college, coming out of high school, getting jobs, going to trade school and coming out and getting jobs, whatever they're going to be doing, and they're not going to be earning enough money to afford a home because wages haven't kept up with home prices. Since we've come out of the Great Recession, home prices have been steadily going up because those homes are owned by private equity companies, are owned by billionaires who are parking capital in them. And they're charging high rents, and then when they decide to sell it, they're going to charge a higher price because it's all about money. It's an investment. They're not looking at it as anything other than money. And when you're in a point like we are with late stage capitalism, you have the very small rich people at the top who are the ones holding all of the capital. And they're controlling this market. And they used to not play in the home market like this, and so the home market used to not be as screwed up as it is now. But now they're playing in that just the same way as they play on Wall Street, and it's hurting all of us. And it's particularly going to hurt the millennials, Generation Y. It's going to hurt Generation Z, which is my daughters. They're Generation Z. And unless the government does something to interfere with that, it's going to continue. My brother wanted me to bring up his opinion, which is private equity companies should not be able to buy individual family homes as investments. But like I told him, you'd have to change a lot of things to make that happen. You can't tell somebody, you've got money, this thing's for sale, you can't buy that thing because you don't need that thing. You know, that's not something the government's able to do. But the government needs to do something with the housing situation. You know, they could do some kind of subsidy for people wanting to buy a home. If the person has a income of a certain amount or lower, but then all that's doing is providing more wealth to these people who are playing this game with the housing market. And that doesn't work. And I mean, you could try passing a law that says you can't buy a house as an investment, but then that would hurt average people who buy houses as an investment. You know, I've known people who, through their life, bought a house they lived in, and then they started buying another house, and I mean, some of these folks they're not rich, they're making a decent living, And what they're doing is tightening their belt very tight so they can make multiple mortgages, get people in renting the home as soon as possible, the second home, to alleviate how much they're having to pay themselves. And then they buy a third house. And by the time, they're elderly, they're looking at, well, we've got 7 houses, 8 houses, 10 houses. We're going to be able to leave our kids so they can make the monthly income off of it, or they can just sell them and divide the money, whatever they're going to do. It's something we did through our lives to help our kids have a bigger step from all these years of doing this ourselves. And it's a lot of work on an average person, because you've got to collect rent, you've got to get people in the homes every time somebody moves out, you've got to deal with the damages, with the upkeep. It's a lot to deal with. But I mean, to just say you can't buy a home as an investment is going to hurt some average people who are trying to build more family wealth from their middle class position by doing that. So that's not necessarily a solution either. But I would absolutely agree with saying Wall Street needs to stay on Wall Street. They screwed up the economy enough with what they do in the stock market and the games they play. We don't need them doing that in the housing market. We don't need them buying up all of the apartments in a town so they can jack the rents up and say you have no choice. If you can't buy a home, then you've got to rent. And once you start renting, you're not going to be able to save up the money for a down payment to buy a home, and you get stuck in this cycle. It's asinine, and something that our elected officials need to deal with. Right now, I don't believe there's anybody trying to deal with it, and hopefully, whoever's in charge of HUD for the Biden administration will start to try and make inroads in this, because we're, as I said, 7 to 12 million individual units short on single-family housing units for that are affordable, and that's insane for a country that's this wealthy. Again, thanks for watching. If you like the videos, please hit the subscribe button, and again, have a good day.